spokesmen or spokespeople, apart from their undying and unquestionable loyalty, is in this case, at least in the case of Rivers State, you've seen some clarity and repetition of particular phrases, and I've seen that in a lot of my friends that send those broadcasts to to convince us that the River State situation or was the right step to take. There is a continued emphasis on when there's a threat to the country's economic status of viability. I'm not quoting, so I'm paraphrasing, but that was part of that statement. That was some of the bedrock on which the outwardly the River State of emergency was declared, the threat to the nation's economic status, and that's because River State obviously produces most of the crude oil. Well, produces a good chunk of the crude oil that the country exports and on which our budget is based on.
Right.
So obviously sets Rivers and some other maybe 5 or 6 other states in Nigeria apart from the rest of the states. So point of note, if we base that principle, any of those other 6 governors, if there are any issues in their state, could face the same um, you know could face the same action. But obviously Plateau State falls outside of that space. What we have are losses to life of Nigerian citizens, and we have moved from, like you said, if you add the last two episodes, probably talking about over 100, and those are the official numbers. So well, I don't know if they're official or unofficial numbers. We're talking about 100 Nigerian citizens. So the question we always ask is, what is the value of a Nigerian citizen? And this is not about the situation. This is not just about this government. It's about every Nigerian government. What do we value the most? And I always have this feeling, until the day we get to the point where we value the lives of one Nigerian citizen, maybe our government will pay a lot more attention to the issues on ground. But that, I digress. Let's go back to the main issue. So, like the presidential spokesman pointed out, this is the long-lasting issue and it's been recurring over years. It comes in cycles, it comes, it goes. It seems to be sorted. It tends to reoccur. Some of it are tribal, some of it are ethnic. There's a lot about obviously the typical heads, grazers versus pastoralists, your grazers and your farmer clashes. It's a mix of various issues in Plateau State. Interestingly, for those who are grown up in Jos and those who have come from Jos, one of the things you always hear about that, and is about how peaceful Jos and Plateau State by extension is. But we've seen these kind of things happen repeatedly over the years. So the president is not wrong in wanting to ask for an end to it. I'm just a bit, because I'm someone who is very particular about language, and I find it very. I think we've gone to this area where the same way you raise young boys, you also raise leaders to have this strongman type of language, so marching orders. And I do hope we get to the point where we understand that in the democracy that we operate, each of the component units actually separate from the other. And when we choose, and when we eventually choose, or if we ever choose to practice actual federalism, we would understand that the state constituent units, have a high level of independence, and which is unfortunate. That's the main basis of which the River State issue has come upon.
Right. Right.
How independent are the component units from the center? That's another discussion for another day, but the discussion that needs to be had if we ever want to get a Nigeria that has value, because it also speaks to how they contribute economically to this center post and the other constituent units. But because I do flinch when I hear strong words like he's giving marching orders. The state governors do not report to him. The state governors really report to their people. In reality, they all come from the same, but the state governors do report to their people. They don't report to the president. It's not like he's appointed them, despite all the political mechanisms or machinations that happen in the background. But yes, is there a problem that needs to be sorted out? Yes. What actions need to be taken? And I think the president has pointed also in his comments. Well, this will not be sorted out by force, like a lot of the other issues that we're having in the country. it needs to be sorted out by policy, planning, implementation, engagements, and education. One of the things that we've seen is that a lot of the practices that tend to trigger some of these things are the bedrock of some, because a lot of these things, the bedrock of some of these things are just is economic or economic. We build upon on top of that economic, issues or fault lines. We use ethnicism, religion as stressors to those fault lines.
Okay.
But when you sort out those issues, then people are able to speak with some level of clarity and understanding, because you're giving them an alternative to how they can live. And believe you me, I do hope they get to some resolution. I do hope, language, irrespective of the language that's being used, that the government does get to ground, engages the parties, or tries to find out what the issue is, and tries to come to some resolution, and uses whatever tools he has, legitimate tools he has, to resolve this issue. Because you know one of the things that we have seen in Nigeria today, and worldwide, is that a lot of the things that we traditionally rely on might not see us through the global economic shakes. We need to look at other things that we have inherent in us. Plateau State has beautiful weather. It has
Oh
beautiful
yes,
environment. It has everything that should make it self-reliant.
indeed.
And if you sort out security of Plateau State and the surrounding places, maybe, just maybe, they might be able to get to that level.
Mm. It's just such a sad situation out there in Plateau State, and it is not should I say unique to Plateau State. A lot of other areas in the country are going through different things in terms of security or insecurity. Recently, the governor of Borno State, Babakana Zulum, has been more or less singing like a canary. You're talking about how in the space of Boko Haram attacks are beginning to, should I say, pick up once again, and things are not as peaceful as maybe they seem to be once were. In Benue State, this is coming out of the Vanguard as well. Governor Hyacinth Alia of the state has actually warned that he more or less can't guarantee the safety of any person or group coming to the state without his knowledge. And he was talking about also those who are planning to visit the IDP camps in the state. They need to get prior approval from Benue State Emergency Management Agency before embarking on such visits. One thing that seems to be unique or common, should I say, in all these states is this: state governors don't seem to have a grip on what is going on security wise within their states. And this is where we are right now. A governor coming to say that I cannot guarantee the safety of those coming without knowledge.
So I don't want to speak a lot about Governor Zulum, because he's basically echoing what a lot of people have been saying about what appears to be, and I think even in the media channels, there's been a tendency to act as if a lot of what is happening in some parts of where we still have pockets of, or we still have some level of insurgency. There's been less reporting. There's been less focus on it. There's been less of talk about it, like in maybe two governments ago. Even, and it didn't start today. We saw it a lot of it in the last government. There was a lot more focus on trying to speak of the exploits, and which is what the government would typically ask. But there are checks and balances in the system, and we do expect the media, in the both the formal and informal level, to actually shine some light on if issues that are happening. So if the governors are, who are supposedly, and I use the word air quotes here, the chief security officers of the state, are making such comments, then obviously there's a need to take them seriously in a large way. Although in the cases of Benue State, I do believe that there are some political undertones, because if I do recall, and I can't recall, there was some visitor that was supposed to come in, and the governor wasn't exactly on board with that visitor. The so basically that's what's happening with, in Benue State. There seems to be some level of political activities or political um, undertone behind the governor's comments. But yes, one of the things that we need to one of the things that need to come up at some stage, and we talk a lot about. I think I spoke about federalism or true federalism, and I think Nigeria just needs to have an understanding of what systems we want to practice and how we want to practice those systems, because at some point, we need the question about how much power does the government have. So you have a governor who, in most cases, has a large security budget,
Right.
but has really little or no control over the security apparatus, as in the formal security apparatus, which is the police or whatever. He can make requests to them, but he really has no control over them. Now, how does that pan out when things need to be done? Do we need to structure a situation where the governors have actual power over them, or do we need to structure a situation where, you know, the governors have their own security entities, or they are able to at least exert some power driven by the constitution over them? There needs to be some sit down and some agreement about how this happens. Because if you have security budget sitting down and it's not being used for the sake of security, obviously what you have long term is that they will be pilfered off.
Definitely.
So those are a lot of things that we need to have discussions around and we need to understand. And what I really hope that we see now, the representatives from the state governors to the state legislators actually focusing on those things and asking questions about what role should the states and the various functional units be playing in this country called Nigeria, and trigger those discussions at the federal level. What we tend to see is a lot of changes happening at the federal level and coming downwards, and we are seeing less happening the other way around, at least from my own point of view. So I do hope that a lot of that changes. But yes, like I said, we need to sort out security. And I don't want to go into the entire political backbashing and back and forth, which also things are safer than before. When we use this comparative thing about things that is safer than before, what was before, what is now?
Exactly.
What is exactly safety means that I can choose to enter a downfall without having to turn left or right or think about what might happen to me as an average Nigerian citizen. Or when I'm when I'm driving on the express, or when I get to a traffic light at night, I feel free to stop and follow the traffic light instead of being looking over my shoulder and thinking that somebody will pull up behind me. Because even these just things that we need to prioritize safety. I think that's for me, and security in this country, because that's one way we can move towards even our economic goals.
Most definitely, without having a secure country, moving towards the economic goals will probably be one of the most difficult things to do. Stevie Kelly in Maryland on WhatsApp says, it appears that the people that called for a truce in River State are the ones weaponizing the killers. Do you have proof of that, Steve? Otherwise, the killers won't be this brazen in killing human beings. By the way, on a flimsy, the flimsy reasons state of emergency was quickly pronounced in River State, I think Plateau State deserves a state of emergency as well now. Okay, thank you for sharing your thoughts. So, talking to Ajayi Olunua says the wanton killings in Plateau has become a genocide, and the president should immediately declare a state of emergency there instead of giving ineffective marching orders to the governor that lacks the capacity to contain the situation. It's horrible what's going on in the state. All right. Let's see. Let me take one more before we get back into the stories. Peter in Festac says, on the Plateau State killings, he says Emperor Tinubu is President Tinubu, please, has given marching orders to the governor, his appointees. I'm not sure what you mean there. Democracy ended in Nigeria on May 29, 2023. We're still in a democratic state, too. They can use all the grammar they want to use to justify the River State capture. One thing is certain, there is an end. Shame on the judiciary, shame on the National Assembly using voice votes to support democratic it says democratic Queen River State. I don't know about that one.
So really. I think I wanted to chip in. So I think when I spoke about the Benue State undertones, actually I think the presidential candidate from the last elections had informed them that he wanted to visit the ID camps in Benue State. That's when we heard the echoes from the governor saying that he couldn't guarantee anybody's safety. And we've seen that card being played, or even in Kogi State recent times. So it's a card that most of the governors tend to play where they don't want opposing views, opposing visitors from the opposing camp to come to their states.
Indeed. All right, let's get back into the nitty-gritty here. Let's talk about power. This is coming out of the Vanguard as well. Now, the power generation companies, as the Gencos, have threatened an imminent shutdown if the federal government fails to settle outstanding invoices totaling over 4 trillion naira. The chairman of the Genco's board of trustees, Sunny Bailey, retired, raised the alarm over a looming shutdown of operations in a statement on Monday in Abuja.
So, well, this has many angles to it. So, the Gencos, the chairman of the board of trustees of the Gencos, which are the generating companies of power generation companies. So, yeah, the electricity you enjoy at home, these guys are responsible for generating the power. Then they move it to the transmitting companies who transmit it, who are supposed to transmit what they generate, at least, and they transmit it to the discos who are supposed to now push it to your various homes. They distribute those ones, distribute it to our homes where we consume, so we're the final consumers. Obviously, if you think about it that way, once we consume, we're supposed to pay our bills. That money goes to the discos who pay whatever they pay to the transmission, who now also pay whatever needs to go to the gencos for the power they generated is also paid, right? So just think about it in, like, I think what they used to use the word, that pyramid or that triangle. Now, when you think about it that way, then you also look at the fact that within the Nigerian system, we set up this what's supposed to be temporary, what was supposed to be, or is supposed to be a temporary organization, which is MBET, which is the Bulk Electricity Trading Company. They are supposed to make those payments to the Gencos over a period of time. What the Gencos are saying is that, see, they say that we are owing, that the country is owing them, and when they say the country, from MBET we should be paying them, which means that the consumption by Nigerians across the country has reached 4 trillion, and they are really concerned because they don't see how this money is going to get back to them. And if you look back at how it's gotten to 4 trillion, you get to 4 trillion overnight. What has happened is that over the years, almost every other year, whenever they receive payments from MBET is only paying a percentage of the total bill. So I think at 2022 or 2021, they paid around 92%, then it fell to around 54% 2022, and so on and so forth. So they are paying only a portion of what is the entire bill for what is generated. And also there's also the shortfall that you get, because MBET at the particular point, one of their concerns was that MBET was paying only the portion that was consumed by the discos.
Okay.
So, obviously if they generate, like, for point of comparison, maybe 20, I'm using 20 as an odd number, I'm not going to put any technical terms around it. It goes to transmission companies. Transmission companies might not be able to transmit all of that, because the distribution companies might not be able to take all of that. So maybe you end up sending maybe 10 or 15 at the end of the distribution company, which is what they pay for. So there's a shortfall of 5 from what they've generated. Now that's supposed to be also covered by MBET, but over the years they've also complained that MBET basically is paying them only for what has been transmitted. And there are several other things. There's gas shortages, and their cost on gas,
So many
which tends to
different
fluctuate
issues.
to the market. There are so many issues, and what they're saying is, see, at this point, we have gotten to this point of this is how much we're being owed. We don't see a solution in sight, and this is affecting our performance. This is affecting our obligations, because they have obligations to improve their facilities, or to improve their facilities and their operations, to pay their salaries, for financing, because obviously a lot of these monies that they're using for their operations are actually sourced or financed. They have a lot of obligations that they're claiming they're not able to meet. So they are basically coming out now and making us see, if we don't get paid, we don't get paid, or we don't have a solution in sight, then our only solution is to basically just hold back what we are generating, which is cut off the power supply.
And that means the whole country is plunged into darkness, more or less.
Basically. And it's one of the ironies of the situation we found ourselves, because we cannot afford to not have power. But there's also we're having power at what cost? Because one of the other questions that we asked, and one of the other things that will be thrown on the table is, the monies that they'll be received from today from the consumers, will it be enough at any point to pay off what needs to be paid out to the gencos and what the districts need to receive without intervention from the government? It now also brings up the argument about cost reflective rates and having to up the current rates. And when you balance all of that, the average Nigerian is watching from afar, just shaking his head and bowing and just going on his knees to pray to God that what else will I have to bear? But we need to actually have, the government needs to actually have, well, when I say the government, we need to actually have a clear solution and a clear way forward, because there needs to be some form of sustainability, and everything needs to be balanced out. So there's a need for profitability, there's a need to cover their costs, there's also a need because electricity is not just about watching TV or people having a nice time. It's also about productivity.
Definitely.
How do we trigger industrialization or manufacturing that we're looking at? How is that input cost passed on to the guy who's going to consume the product? Does he have enough money after paying his own bills at home to be able to buy the products that you are manufacturing? It's an entire cycle that the government and you guys who are responsible for it, including the citizens, they actually need to think about and see how do we sort it at the end of the day. What gives?
It just seems like the issues just keep on snowballing. Now we are here, and the Gencos are threatening to stop what they do. 4 trillion naira. It's not small money, any which way you actually want to look at it. Really hope that this can be sorted out because the consequences I really don't want to think about going forward. All right, let's jump into another story here. This one is coming out of the Premium Times. We mentioned River State earlier on. I mean, why not just head there right now? Where the state administrator Ibokete Ibas has asked the NBA, that's the Nigerian Bar Association, to refund the 300 million naira the River State government paid to the association for hosting the 2025 NBA Annual General Conference. Now, I'm going to take a quote here. It says, while we respect the NBA's right to choose its conference venues, we find it curious that the association, despite its principled position, didn't address the refund of the 300 million naira already paid by the River State government for the hosting rights of the 2025 conference. That's Mr. Ibas' spokesperson, speaking to Premium Times there on Monday. Now, off of NBA moved the conference from River State to Enugu because of what's been going on in River State, stating that President Tinubu's declaration of the state of emergency in the state violated Section 305 of the Constitution and so on and so forth. But the meat of the matter is 300 million naira. The state administrator has said, you've moved the conference away, no problem. But you failed to address the refund of the monies paid to you for the conference in question.
Okay. I don't think this is the first time that NBA has taken this kind of stand. I do recall, I think they were supposed to have a similar conference in Kaduna State some years back, which I believe they shifted out after they had clashes. I think there was something with the then Governor El Rufai. So this is a bit consistent with the NBA, how they take their position. I do think that I do like the fact that they are consistent with that. I need to be so anybody can correct me because I do guess at some point is going to do fact check what I just said. But I do start with I do like the fact that if I'm right that they have been a bit consistent with these things with their positions, and if the when the bar association stops talking in the country, especially in a country like Nigeria, then we just know that nobody's gonna if civil society is not talking, your bar association not talking, your opposition is in coma, then you just know you have a dictatorship. You don't need to you don't even need to check for the president doesn't the people in charge or the president doesn't need to do anything. Just assume you're in the dictatorship because nobody else is talking, right? Or everybody seems to be on the same plate. So you have people who are jumping parties to go to the side of the winner. We are doing all sorts of laws to make sure that more people are jumping into our party and all that. But so when the NBA takes this kind of position, I have nothing against it. Yes, the administrator has, and the administrator through his spokesman, they have made a point. The NBA has also in saying that hey, we give the state government give you an amount of money to host you whatever here. Please refund. Now if you are holding on to the same morals or lines of integrity, you need to refund the money. So I do like the fact that they're not questioning the fact that hey, these guys are holding on to some bone. The NBA is claiming that whatever they gave us was not for us to host. It was how did they put it? They said it wasn't given, it was a donation to them. There was no obligation for them to host, and
it wasn't like a payment.
Yeah, there was not that. They said it was basically it wasn't a precondition that they had to host in the state. That they basically gave them whatever contribution, whatever they call it,
or support.
So if the administrator has because the truth is that when organizations like the NBA want to have this kind of occasions, they typically look for where they can get sponsorships from radio stations to state governments to the presidency. They will go around, look, it doesn't mean that once they get there, they will have to host it at those venues. They might have got, as we might care, they might have gotten funding from several states, several states in the country. So it might not just be Rivers, but if the administration has a contract that shows that this was the reason why that money was paid, you should bring it out and take them to court. The MB does not cover the entire judiciary. It can go to the judiciary and have his day in court. That's what I think would happen. That's what I think will happen. I think the MB has made his opinions clear. The administration can choose not to agree with it, and that's the beauty of democracy. But hey, I guess we'll see a lot more about this kind of related issues. But yes, I do like the fact that the NBA for one organization has spoken out and are standing on what they are saying about the money. Like, if there's a contract, let's enforce it. If there's no contract, then hey,
It's gone with the wind. All right, let me take your messages. This is Ade. Let me see it. This is Ade in Lagos. Ade says, in the absence of rule of law, impunity and chaos abound. For the state of emergency in Rivers, the president didn't do the same thing in the north, where the bandits and Boko Haram are having their way, but he declared it in a peaceful state. During NSAS, there was no state of emergency in any part of the country. Then you can see that this is scripted. Really, Ade. All right, thank you for sharing your message. Let me take a couple of more of them before we have to wrap it up. Good morning to you, Adigboyega Adidiji. He says the problem of Nigeria's judiciary system starts from the NBA. It sounds ridiculous to hear a dignified association like the NBA claiming the 300 million naira by the River State government was a gift. I expected them to do the honorable thing by returning the sum back to the initial host. What a shame. Well, Chibuzor said, I mean, if there was there's an agreement in place there. Let
Sophia would say agreement. If there's an agreement, then hey, you need to return the money back. But like I said, it could be a sponsorship like every other organization would seek. So I really can't say much about this. So
Barrister Danokuda in Igodo says, if the security and welfare of the people is the primary function of government, as between the killings of people and threat to crude oil production, which one is more important?
The word that brings dollars to the account seems to be more important.
This is Sunday in Surulere. It says, there's a popular belief that our safety is in the hands of God. We know there is gross incompetence across a lot of leadership levels, but for state governors to say they cannot guarantee the safety of their people is equivalent to admitting defeat. This could ginger the criminals to mobilize more and continue to wreak havoc. Scary times ahead.
The Reverend in Benue was being very political when he went on that road. I'm not speaking for the fact that there are no security concerns, but the Reverend was very specific about the visit to the ID camp, and we know who was coming to visit the ID camp, so you can make your conclusions on that.
Tony Marine Beach says, so far, the government has vowed all the vows and threatened all the threats, regretted all regrets and condemned all condemnations. But until something is done, drastic steps taken, some persons walking the streets in Plateau State today are living dead, victims of another attack. Sad to say, but that's the reality, because another local government is about to be attacked. You know this? How, Tony? When and how did we really get here? Government should get to the root of this and end this menace once and for all. I hear you on that one. Ibrahim Zakari says, any serious government before assuming power must and should have a clear objective as to what to focus on. The tariff prescribed, for instance, the APC government inherited insecurity, doomsday, darkness of discourse, inflation, among others. Can someone tell me what has improved? It's clear the cluelessness of this government. The people are further plundered into poverty instead. What a leadership. And this is Peter. He says, Soweto, Ayo, Nigerians and River State people have accepted a military administrator in democracy. Wow. Tinubu really happened to Nigeria. Well, to give you context, I mean, there were women in River State yesterday who went on a march in support of that. So make of it what you will. At the end of the day, I will not say.
Well, you know, when you weaponize poverty, it's easy to get planned protests. If you give me enough money, I can put one together. 30 minutes.
I'll say you said so. All right, we need to call this a morning on the show. Thank you so much for all the messages, and thank you so very much to Chibuzor for coming in on a Tuesday morning. Always a pleasure having you in the studio.
It's been my pleasure. Have a lovely week, day, and yeah, the rest of the week.
Indeed. And of course, you need to keep it tuned to Smooth 98.1, because we're going to get into the world of great entertainment, gist, and everything in between in the grapevine at 8:15.